Clappity clap.
All right, what's going on, everybody? This is Shay Omasori with Pick Social in the Boothish podcast. I've got a very special guest with me here today. We've got Zach Schiffman of Studio Z Photo Booth.
What's up, Shay?
Zach, what's going on? How's it hanging?
It is a frigid, what is it, Tuesday? Tuesday out here.
I had to think about that for a second. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
I'm at a loss of days.
I mean, that's what happens when everybody's staying at home. Still mid-pandemic, I guess. Omicron is tearing things up. And
Yes,
we're still feeling all the effects of it in photo booth land.
Yeah. For real.
Have you had the privilege of getting the vid yet?
I think I had Omicron early December, like when it first hit New York. They don't really tell you, but I was like the first before everyone started getting it. So it was like a panic because you didn't know what was going to happen. And then now everyone has it and it's like done and over with in 2-3 days.
So you just went out to the movies, went out to a few restaurants, and
sat at home on the couch, alone in my thoughts.
Oh man, that sounds depressing. I'm sure it wasn't. Zach, I guess we kind of got a little bit of ahead of ourselves, but if you don't mind introducing yourselves to the audience, that would be amazing.
Yeah. So my name is Zach Schiffman. I own a company called Studio Z Photo Booths. We also go by Studio Z Custom Photo Activations, depending on who we're working with, because we like to think that photo booths is only a part of what we do. And we're based here just outside New York City in New Jersey, but we operate nationwide and or worldwide if the opportunity arises. We don't let market dictate where we work. We will go to the work. So we've been doing this about 10 years now, I think. Yeah, 10, 11 years now. It's sort of all a blur.
Yeah, it goes by quick.
It does.
So how did you ultimately get into the photo booth industry?
Yeah, so photography has always been a passion and a hobby of mine. I always had like a Canon Rebel in college. I always took photography classes in high school, back to when, we were doing darkroom photography, and really learning the basics of exposure and composition and all that stuff. And shortly after I graduated college, I went to college for television production and entertainment marketing. So it's all in that same field as well, in the visual and media arts. I was out in Vegas at my cousin's wedding, and I hadn't been to a ton of weddings at that time. I was still young. My family was mostly older and married already. And the photographer there had a portrait style photo booth set up. I don't know if I'd really classify it as a photo booth or what it was. It was essentially like a portrait magazine style, seamless backdrop, 3-point lighting, and they were shooting fun post photos. There was no instant sharing. There was no printing that I remember on the spot. I think the photos were posted on a gallery a few days later that you could save. High key white backdrop, all that stuff. And I was like, wow, this is a lot of fun. And fast forward a few years, I'm working at ESPN full time as a stage manager in TV production. I'm living in the middle of Bristol, Connecticut, which is kind of like rednecky, nowhere, middle of Connecticut. And my grandmother ended up passing away, and she left some money to me and my family. Nothing crazy, split between us. And I paid off my student loans with it, the remainder I had left. And after I paid off the student loans, the responsible thing to do, I think I had like 2,000 to 3,000 left over. And I said, well, I should treat myself to something, so I bought a Canon 6D and some portraiture lighting, a pop-up backdrop, which was the worst investment I ever made because I could never fold it back up once I unpopped it, and I ended up throwing it away. But I wanted to be a portrait photographer and a wedding photographer. And, I was shooting friends. I booked a wedding, I think on Craigslist, and, for dirt cheap. And I was at that wedding and I nearly missed the first kiss. It was so stressful. And I was like, this is just not for me. This is not what I want to do. And I thought about that wedding I went to in 2009 that had the photo booth style set up. And I thought, hey, you know what? I think I could do this. What if I pivot to this world? So I had all the equipment I really needed. I I found Breeze software back then when it was available for Mac. I downloaded that. I built out a UI, and I got on Groupon, and Groupon was a different beast back then. It was a deal a day. It wasn't like the marketplace you see now. It was you were the one deal of the day, marketed to the whole state or area that you lived in. But of course, with Groupon, you have to give up, I think it's 50% of your profit of the list price, which already has to be discounted off your retail price. I didn't really have a retail price at the time, so you just made up a number. I think I told them we would do a deal for $400, and out of that, I made 200. It was like next to nothing, but I had a weekend long ad placement. I was blasted out to the whole Hartford, Connecticut market, and my phone just lit up. And I booked enough events that day or that weekend to fund, getting my first dye sub printer, getting some props, getting what I needed to fully get operational. Would I do Groupon again? No. Did it work at that time in the format that Groupon was? Yes. It worked beautifully for me. And from there, I didn't have a photo booth as we know them now. I used my camera on a tripod with an Alien Bees ring light with a moon unit. If you've ever seen the moon unit, it's like a hexagonal softbox that goes around the camera. It's huge, but it's very cool to see in person. It took a great photo. I used a seamless paper backdrop. I lit the backdrop from behind in high key. I mean, I did a lot of things that, because I had that wedding in 2009 with the 3-point lighting, and I thought, like, this is what I want to replicate. And people loved it. And then it just started growing from there, eventually morphing into regular photo booths and corporate, and now what we've become 10 years later.
Okay, so you starting with that type of setup, was it because you just wanted to start with the equipment you already had, or was it because you're looking for a specific look?
I didn't really know about photo booth kiosks, that open air terminology. I think I knew of Photo Booth Supply Company, and that was kind of like, their marketing was so good back then. They were the big first, like, we market towards wedding photographers as an add-on, and I wanted that. I just couldn't afford 9-10 grand, but I loved their style. I mean, down to the point where when I bought my first kiosk, I bought one that was similar. It was actually a cube that held a printer inside it, but it reminded me of theirs. It was the clean white aluminum, an Alien Bees flash mounted on top, but it was some guy in Canada who made it, who was not the most trustworthy person in the world, but I got it, and I made do with it. And it allowed me to grow the brand. And eventually, 2 years ago, I think I bought my first 3, I think I have 4 total Photo Booth Supply Company kiosks that, I bought most of them used off other people, and now that's what my employees mainly use because of their ease and compactness in their Pelican cases. So I leave those in the city in a storage unit where my staff just picks those up and rolls out.
Which one did you get? I'm gonna mess up the names of it, but there's the older style.
The older style is what we generally use. The legacy, they call them. We have a salsa. I don't really use it. I'm not huge into iPad booths anymore, especially for like social events. They have, in my personal opinion, they have a place for certain things, for permanent installations, drop-offs, shipping, corporate style things. I just don't really promote it for the social events. I just don't think the quality is worth it for what it is, but that's just my personal take on it.
I've got some questions for you about that, and we're definitely going to dive a little bit more into the DSLR and iPad stuff. So when you were first getting started at that point, so you said that you found Photo Booth Supply Co. stuff all over the internet, right? Where were you going to find like educational material about educating yourself on the industry and what it looks like?
That's a good question. I think when I got my first like kiosk, that one from Canada, I think I finally found Photo Booth Network on Facebook. I remember doing a New Year's Eve party for a venue in Connecticut, and I think I had just joined PBN, and I posted, because I was so proud of myself. I had like 2 or 3 6-foot tables filled with every prop imaginable at this New Year's event. And I posted it. And mind you, my quality was amazing at the time. I was using a 6D with an L series lens with strobe lighting. I mean, I still wish I could go back to that. They just like that equipment just doesn't fit in the small form factors that we use now. But like, I look back at those photos and I was like, those are the best photo booth photos I think I've ever taken. But I had this like sea of props, and I remember gloating about it on PBN. I'm sure you could find the post if you search my name and go back far enough. And now, like, if I saw that posted, I would like my skin would crawl. Like I hate myself for it. Like it's not me. It's not my brand anymore. We've evolved so much from it. But and I think you see that a lot with new people where you come in, you're like, photo booth, I need to have props, but you don't. Props are a crutch.
They're a crutch for what?
I think they're just a crutch because a good photo, a good exposure, proper lighting makes a photo shine. And you don't need props when you have that. But when, maybe you don't know how to use a DSLR or you're using an iPad and you need something to take away from the flaws in your quality, and then you can promote like, hey, you bring 200 plus props to every event. And there are customers that probably want that.
I think I can 100% agree with you. The industry definitely has made a huge shift away from props. Right. I mean, especially because of like COVID accelerated.
COVID. Yeah. Right? I mean, COVID was not a catalyst, but it exacerbated and we weren't really doing props before it. And now I use it as my excuse when someone asks. Like we have some custom signs that we made and printed, and those are very minimal. And like, I'll bring those, but I don't do wigs. I don't do hats, especially now with COVID. Nothing that touches the face.
If I caught you correctly, you said that you got your first event off of Craigslist. Is that correct?
When I wanted to be a wedding photographer, I think my first actual photo booth event was off of Groupon.
At that point, when you were doing it, why not go back to Groupon and double dip?
I don't think they let you at the time. I think it was more half the time. When people would call for a date, when they saw it on Groupon, I would try to push them off Groupon and be like, hey, I'll give you $50 off if you book with me directly. You're saving money. I'm making more money. Groupon loses their cut. So I tried to push that way. And then I think, I was cheap enough at the time that it was just a lot of word of mouth. I didn't really need the extra marketing. I was also working full time in TV at a place where my schedule changed every week. I worked nights, I worked weekends. It was hard for me to book really far out, because I would have to take paid time off to do it.
Like, so you did Groupon, you were getting about $200 per event. What was your standard pricing off of Groupon at the time?
Yeah, I mean, I think once I got right off of Groupon, I was probably charging that $400. Okay. I quickly went to the $800, $850 maybe, depending on what we were doing.
Like $400 for how many hours? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, I always been a baseline of 3 hours. I don't know where that became like the standard. Yeah. I feel like that's most people. Some people do 4. I don't know. 3 has always been my number. And then, pay to play. If you want me to stay, you can pay me to stay. Time is money type thing. Yeah. I think I quickly went to 800 and then, yeah.
So $400, 3 hours, 1,000 props. Zach Schiffman of Studio Z shows up and does your event.
Yes.
At what point, so you started talking about, so you went up to 800. At what point, like what caused that shift? When did you realize that you could charge more?
I think it was just, one day I thought, hey, I should make more money doing this. And, once you get one booking and you realize like the bookings are still coming at this price point, well, then there's no reason to ever go back. There's, if someone's willing to pay 8, that means other people are willing to pay 8. If someone's willing to pay 1,500, other people are willing to pay 1,500. And I stopped being scared of pricing myself. I think I had the quality. I think there wasn't a ton of competition at the time. I was starting to network and get in with like local wedding groups and other vendors who were very excited about my services. And then, then it's just that word of mouth referral. And then once, you have people supporting you, they're going to just pitch you. They don't care about the price. If their clients trust them, they'll pay what that price is.
So was that all within your first year that you made your shift from 400 to 800?
I would say that within the first year or two. I'd have to like really go back and look, because that time period's kind of all a blur of how long before I made that move I was starting to get into down to New York. But yeah, I mean, I think it was all within that year or two, because then I moved to a more affluent area, which also said to me, well, it's time to raise my prices. I live in like one of the wealthiest counties in America,
Yeah.
we're going to 1,500.
And this is where when you moved to what county?
I moved to Fairfield County, Connecticut. So
Okay.
it was like Southern Connecticut, just outside New York City. So I was working in New York City for NBC now and taking my business more full time as well. And I was in this better area of Connecticut with the elite wedding venues, or I had New York City at my disposal now, but I had all of Fairfield County. I had the New Haven, Connecticut area where there are great wedding venues. And then you go out, towards your neck of the woods and like Mystic and Rhode Island. And
you were coming here and stealing from my people.
Mystic was like one of my favorite places to always go to. Still some of my favorite venues to this day are in Mystic, Connecticut. I don't go there a ton anymore, but I used to go there all the time. And that area, it's people with beach houses.
Yeah. So you jumped up to $1,500, 3 hours. And what was what were you offering at this point? Were you using that kiosk at this point, or like what did your setup look like?
Yeah, I was definitely using the kiosk, and I think that was a catalyst for it too. I had a more clean, streamlined product, but otherwise the services were the same. I just knew my worth and started charging more. Yeah. 1,500 has been my base to this day. I don't leave the house for less.
Were you doing anything to set yourself apart from your local competitors at that point, or do you think
it was still mainly quality? I was still using an L lens on a 6D body versus people that were using the kit lenses with a pop-up flash and a Canon T2, T3. There's just a difference when you compare those photos side by side with like proper studio lighting. We were doing the instant sharing. That's when I learned about you and PicPic, and been a customer since the beginning with you. We've always done printing. I think at some point we probably started offering other services, be it iPad booths or whatnot. I don't remember what year those really came into play. I mean, I think too, a lot of the people in my area were kind of around that price point too, that 1,000 to 1,500. But that's what and I preach this a lot, and I think that's just around when I learned what perceived value is. It depends on what you're looking for. Like I'm looking for a plumber the other day, and you want to find the cheapest, but sometimes the cheapest doesn't know what they're doing. So if someone says, "Hey, my quote's $750," and someone else says, "Hey, my quote is $600," I may go with the $750 because this guy might know what he's doing more. And he pulls up and he's got the van with his branding on it. Like, I know he spent some money on his time. I know he's licensed. I know he's insured. He's doing things to code. And that kind of stuff translates. I can't tell you the amount of people that call me and say, well, I got a quote for this. I'm like, and it's all the same stuff. And I'm like, okay, go with them. And they're like, what? I'm like, why do I need to match you? If you found what you're looking for at $500 less, go hire that person. You're not my client. That's fine. Like, I'll move on. I'll find someone else. And then, maybe 6 times out of 10, 7 times out of 10, or even less, they come back and like, okay, we're ready to book. So did you not find someone cheaper? Did you not like what you saw from that person? So we weren't the same, which meant I'm worth more money. Once you get into that mindset, I don't need to sell myself to you all the time. If you come to me and you show your cards and say, I love your work, but I found someone cheaper. Okay, great. If you love their work, go with it. But you probably don't love their work, and that's why they're cheaper.
Well, how did you get to that mindset?
I think it was just one of those, like, when I upped my prices and people were still booking, like it just became ingrained in my mind that people will pay for luxury. Like, why does someone buy a Lexus over a Toyota? They're made by the same company. It's perceived luxury. People are like, oh, that person has a Lexus. Oh, this person brought Studio Z to their wedding. They're the same parts at the end of the day, but one might be a little more polished, a little more refined, or it's the brand name.
So at what point within your business, right, would you say that you hit 6 figures? Was it around the time when you made the move?
Yeah, I think it was like year 3 or 4. I've always had a steady incline with the caveat of 2020, which we still did 200,000 in gross sales, or 250 with virtual and everything. I think like my first year I made $4,000. and then 8, and then 15 grand. And then I think I was pretty much at 6 figures come year 3 when I took this new job. I had my weekends free. I could book out. I could take time off when I needed to. And I just put that energy into it. And when you start charging 1,500 minimum, you can get to 6 figures pretty quick, especially when you start adding hours at 300-400 an hour. You add travel costs to places that are far, things like that. And yeah, I mean, it happened fast, and then I never looked back.
All right. So I know you mentioned with, getting with local planners.
Yeah.
What other things were you doing that helped you get more and more business at that time?
The weirdest thing I can say is I really have never marketed. I mean, I got maybe a free year or 2 on the Knot for doing an event for them over the years, but that I think maybe got me 2 bookings in a lifetime. Like, I don't really credit that for anything. It's a lot of word of mouth. Yeah, I did a few networking events early on, like one wedding show at a new venue that may have gotten me a few, but it was mainly just being that happy face with planners and other photographers and the like in the area. It's actually really interesting because if I go back and like on Facebook, the only planners I'm really friends with on Facebook are like ones from my original days, because I was so actively like, I want to be friends with this person. Like, let's connect, do this and that. And now I just have so much business coming from everywhere that I like, oh, it's a new planner. Great. And I'm not like, if they like me, they'll keep referring me out. But back then it was like, how are you? How are the kids? What's new? Like, so great to see you again. You make those friendships and you join those inner circles, especially in a smaller state, when you're in a smaller market versus like New York City, where there are hundreds of planners and whatnot. And I would just rely on them, and they brought their clients, and some of them still do. I get the emails like, hey, I know you're not in this area anymore, but I can't find anyone like you, and I need your 360 at Mohegan Sun. And they're like, this client, has money. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, all right, what's money? And like, they have a budget of 6,000. I will be at Mohegan Sun.
I'll be there.
I will be there. I will happily be there, and I will get a room, and we'll make do.
So once you broke the 6-figure threshold, what were there any different challenges that you now had that you didn't have prior to that?
Yeah, I think the legitimacy of your business really comes into play then. I still didn't have staff. It's still something I struggle with, and that's a control thing too. Proper insurance. I was always insured, but I did stupid things back in my day. Like, I used to make a slideshow of all the photo booth photos. You tell me the song you want, I'll make a slideshow of all your photos. Dropped it in iMovie, took me 2 seconds, but I post those on Facebook. And one day I got a letter in the mail saying I owed $45,000 to Universal Music Group.
Oh, shit.
And, people in these 360 groups now joke like, oh, we're just a small company. Like, they can choose whatever music they want. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, no, it is, because it wasn't Universal that came after me. It was a small law firm that Universal hired for the specific purposes of go find copyright infringement, sue them, and you keep a percentage of everything you collect. And they're just on a fishing mission. And very luckily, I avoided all of it. I was connected to someone who knew the person that wrote me the letter. And that person was an intern for them and said, he's got nothing. Don't just stop responding and he'll go away. And he did. But it still fucking terrified me. Excuse me for swearing. And, it's like every time I see someone use like Disney art, I'm like, Disney has a whole email you can just submit people to. Like, if you piss someone off, they can just report you. And Disney takes that stuff seriously. They'll come at you hard. I took a screen grab. I sent it to Mir and Catalina the other day. Someone posted in the group. Sorry for going off topic.
No. Let's do it.
It's really actually interested me. Someone wrote, I have an Oscar themed event. And someone was like, get Oscar statues. And they meant those like knockoff ones on Amazon that look nothing like the Oscar statue. But someone replied, be careful. Oscar is a trademarked figure. My company got sued for having just a simple Oscar statue picture on its website. That settlement cost us 10 grand. So
Wow.
I don't even know like in what nature he was using the Oscars statue logo on his photo booth website, but they found it and now he's 10 grand out.
That's
But
nuts.
those are like, you know, when you start these companies, you're like, get rich quick scheme. This is easy side money. But if your business makes $4,000 or $400,000, you still are under the scrutiny of the law and copyright infringement and, um, you know, general liability. When you look at 360s now and spinning platforms and all this stuff. And are you an LLC? Are you an S corp? Or are you just doing this under your name where your bank account's tied to it? And if that lawsuit comes, that's your funds, you know? What's your liability at the end of the day? Those became very, very real things. And I learned something new every year. I went through a whole thing with the state of New York and my payroll services not submitting wages correctly for 4 years. And New York found out during COVID because everyone was filing unemployment and they were like, we don't have you in the system. And then they sent me a letter. They're like, who are these people? And here's probably what you owe us unless you can prove us otherwise. And the number was in the tens of thousands of dollars. And thankfully, like my payroll wasn't that high and I was able to prove it. But like I had to drop ADP as my payroll provider. They were of no help. Like I had to do formal complaints. I got screwed and it was a bad CPA who set me up, who just, you know, did things shadily and not right. And it was nothing I did. I trusted people and you just assume things and then business takes over.
Yeah. So how can you avoid that if you're starting out and you're picking people who you think that you trust? And I mean, you just have to wait for the what is it, the shoe to drop? Is that how the saying goes?
I mean, I guess get yourself, you know, a good CPA, someone who's been around, who has their own firm, you know, that is a partner in a firm who, you know, $1,000 here can save you $10,000 2 years from now. Yeah. We always say, you know, you got to pay to play. You have to spend money to make money. And it's a sad truth. And the administrative side of it is a huge part of it.
Yeah. So how are you able to now stay ahead of the competition when there's, you know, dozens of, let's just say thousands of photo booth companies out there? What are you doing to stay ahead of everybody and to keep getting your 1,500?
Well, the 1,500 is just a base for us now. Like, you know, photo booths are photo booths. Like either you want it or you don't. If you want it, here's the price and we'll happily do it. I get plenty of weddings. I get plenty of corporate with it, and that's fine. We were doing, you know, it's constantly about looking for trends. And I always joke in the groups, by the time Photo Booth Network or community, this and that, it starts promoting and talking about a trend, that trend is over with the major players. And the major players are people, most of those, you know, most of the newer people in these groups have never heard of, you know, OM Digital, Bosco. They've been doing this stuff for a year or two already with their high-end clients, and they set the trend. And now you're trying to ride the coattails. And, you know, it's great when one of these softwares or hardware manufacturers make a product that is a low barrier of entry to market, and it can become a trend in our industry very fast. You see that now with 360. You know, when I started 360 in 2018, I think I was one of 3 companies in New York doing it, OM Digital being the original with, you know, their partnership with OrcaView or whatever it was. And I had to import a 360 from the UK at over $10,000. I had to figure out, you know, there was no wireless transferring of files back then. It was running a long USB cable, doing one rotation and then spinning the arm backwards so the USB cable didn't snap. You know, it was long process times, but these are the things that made me money. I could charge $8 grand for an event doing this because no one else was doing it here, you know, and people on the higher echelon would pay it. And now, you know, you can buy a platform with software for $2,000, $2,500, and it's one click. And, you know, we use them too, and it's great. But now I get $2,500 instead of $8 grand because there's so much competition. 360 is popular now, and great. I do a ton of 360 still, but it's not what I want to do anymore. Now I'm on to the next thing. Like I'm pitching more video-based events, you know, Steadicam videos, dolly slider, robotic arms, those kind of things. And I'm in my head, I'm like, I need to spend a lot of money because I need to start doing things that others can't afford to do or are too scared to afford to do. I'm doing something right now. I'm not going to really go into it for the sake of keeping it under lock and key, but it's cost me 20 grand at this point.
Is that what I think it is?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's cost me 20 grand at this point. It's probably going to cost me another 10 to 15. Okay. And it's all on an assumption that I can make the workflow work, because the workflow doesn't easily exist. And this was the problem with 360. But when I got into 360, I had the customers that pre-booked me enough to cover my ROI on buying the equipment. And I was like, great, I'll buy the equipment, I'll figure it out. This time around, I'm buying the equipment, I'm going to figure it out, and then have to find the customers. So I'm a little scared, but I also needed the tax write-off at the end of the year. It was a good year. It was our best year on record, even with COVID. And I need to take my tax liability down. So on December 31st, I spent 18 grand on something. And I'm like, all right, let's see what happens, And my hope is that it takes off and it can become popular, but most people won't be able to spend 2 grand as a barrier of entry to get into it. And that's sort of what this industry is starting to come to. I mean, you look at TikTok and Instagram and all the things that we were talking about this before we started, that these kids can come up with. Like, this used to be the stuff corporate clients would come to us and say, like, how do we do something fun? Now these kids are doing stuff that renders faster than any of our software can do, and so much easier. So it's like, why do people want photo booths now? They have so much power in their phones. It's so easy for a company to make a TikTok filter or a sound or a trend or that way. Why do they need to hire us for activations? We need to give them something new and unique. And I don't necessarily know what that uniqueness is at this time. But I think it's something more than saying, hey, we can be there with a $1,500 photo booth. I have planners that take better photos than my photo booths do with their like high-end Fuji cameras that they bought at B&H and use on auto. They take great photos. And sometimes I see those and I was like, shit, like I need to up my game,
Competition's getting tough.
Right. Like their behind the scenes photos look better than my output sometimes. I'm like, fuck,
and these planners are buying 360s now.
That goes back to this whole, there's so many pros and cons to, and no offense to you, and software companies, software companies looking for, and hardware companies looking for a quick buck. It's great. It's so easy for you to say, hey, we offer this now, like, let's get so many signups. Yeah. And it doesn't matter to you or them that the market gets flooded, but to the end client, it kind of does, because it brings our costs down. It's like a double-edged sword. But at the same time, I don't always have a workflow down. So when Desintech or when PicPic Social comes out with a workflow or a hardware scenario that works, sometimes it's just great to be able to spend 2 grand and be able to get out and market it. So it goes both ways.
It is a double-edged sword. Where you got the struggles of trying to figure it out yourself if there isn't, but that's really where you're getting the most bang for your buck. You're getting the most money, like you said, with the 360 that was kind of janky, but you were getting 8,000 for it at that time.
I get people that always like, why is your 360 5 times more expensive than this person's? And I did a wedding on Saturday. They saw me 6 months ago down in Virginia at a wedding. They brought us from New York to Virginia to do their wedding, and this couple was there and they were like, oh my God, we love this. We just booked a 360 for our wedding. And they were like, how much are you? And I think I said, we started 2,500. And he's like, oh, wow. I think we spent like 500 or 600.
Oh, wow.
But he's like, do you think it's going to be bad? And I'm like, well, show me their website. And I knew exactly who the person was. I'm not going to put them on blast or anything. It was a local company. And all of their videos on their website were the marketing videos from the manufacturer they bought from. And I can spot those a mile away. And I said, I know these videos are Russian. You can look in the background, nothing's in English. I go, ask them for a gallery from a recent event and see what their actual quality looks like. And I ended up finding one later that night. I said, here's a recent event they did. And I said, now look at mine, now look at theirs. And they were like, well, the deposit for them was only $100. So I think we're just going to eat it and we'll book with you. The next day they booked with us. We did their wedding over the weekend. They were so excited. They screamed my name when they saw me. They were so excited. There was a line the whole night. And, that's how I sell, quality over quantity. I always say too, I'd rather do one event at 2,500 than five at 500 because my time is valuable too.
100%.
So maybe I don't book as much as the lower end person does, but I don't work as much. Yeah. But we make the same money at the end of the day.
So what does the future look like for you, Zach Schiffman, in Studio Z Photo Booth? I've heard in your other, interviews that you're looking to transition to, or you're now looking to be a creative agency.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, my logo says legally we're Studio Z Photo Booths LLC. There are times I wish I never came up with that name, and my logo says Studio Z Custom Photo Activations because I don't like pigeonholing myself as a photo booth company. And you see it a lot in the groups where people are like, I don't think 360 is a trend that'll catch on. Like, I don't see why 4x6 prints are popular. Like 2x6 is what we do. And I don't follow that mindset where I tell people what's popular. I let the client tell me what they want. If they want, I don't do 2x6. Generally, I never have. If they want it, I will do it. But I don't say this is how we do things. Like, I have a client that came to me and I want to do things that are fun and unique. I had a client come to me and he said, we have $1,000 budget, but we're opening the Harry Potter exhibit at the Franklin Institute in Philly. And I'm like, I'm not going to Philly for $1,000 and doing something creative for Harry Potter. In my head, I'm like, I haven't got a ton of creative clients. I'm bored of taking 3 photos and animating it with a logo in the corner. I want to do something fun. But do I want to take a pay cut to be able to do this, to be able to promote it? And part of me is like, yeah, I could give them a few $100s off because I'm going to get a creative output that I can put all over my website. I'll make a promo video out of it, this and that. And I explained to them, I was like, this takes time. We have to program it. You want something very creative and unique. Let's spitball ideas. What will Warner Brothers and Wizarding World allow us to do? And they went back to them and they said, well, Warner Brothers says we can do Sirius Black's Prisoner of Azkaban moving portrait, wanted poster. If you've ever seen Harry Potter, yeah, all photos move. Mm-hmm. So here we have a wanted poster that says, have you seen this wizard? And it's a prisoner screaming. And I got him, they're now booking today, knock on wood, at 3 times what their original budget was. And they want to add custom props. They want to add this and that. And to me, I'm like, they haven't even signed yet. And I'm right before we started this, I was making up samples because I'm like, I want to do this right. I need to get the right filter for this. We're gonna treat it. It's gonna be awesome. This moving video file. We're gonna do a print version of it too. And I know the people there are gonna like absolutely love it because if you've ever met a Harry Potter fan, they are rabid and they love anything in the Harry Potter universe. So be able to create something for them, like these are the guests that are going to post it everywhere. These are the guests that are going to appreciate what you're doing and really respect and love what you do. So that's the kind of stuff that I want to do more of. And I want to find these clients. And I feel like every time I find these clients, COVID comes around and rears its ugly head. I mean, in March 2020, we were really ramping this up. We had Kids' Choice Awards, we had the Masters, golf tournament, all this stuff with like really high-end unique things. We were doing an obstacle course with different photo moments when different things happened. We had an overhead ball pit, unique moments that COVID took away from us, sadly, and never got to come around and do. And now we're starting to book things again, and dates are already moving. Nice. We're, a photo activation for Create and Cultivate, and there are like top 100 awards was supposed to be next week. It's now pushed to March. Thankfully, they also booked, but like we're doing a video that I've never done before, and I now get to spend the next 3 weeks figuring out the proper way to do it. I'm now in the process where I will just pitch things and then go figure them out because I need to advance. I need to do something less stagnant. Photo booths will always be great to me, but they get boring. Like a 3-hour event, if I'm working it, like drags sometimes. And I'm feeling that burn with 360s now too. I'm losing my voice, screaming over the DJ's music. And I'm just like, this used to be so fun for me. And now it's just like, I have to do another 360 on Saturday night. Like, when can I do something that excites me again?
So I think that kind of correlates to the question that I wanted to ask you, which is, so you started as Studio Z photo booth on Groupon, Studio Z high end, photo quality, setups
Yeah.
at events, and then shifting now to, I guess, Studio Z custom photo activations. At what point did you realize, this is the direction that I want to move my business?
It was when I wanted to start branding myself as not a wedding photo booth company. Weddings and social events are probably still like 60% of what we do, but the money comes from the corporate side, and those are the ones I really love doing. The festivals, the conferences, the multi-day events, the unique ideas, and over COVID, I needed to rebrand myself, I think, again. And I said, I'm going to start really promoting myself as a national company.
Yeah.
And I now locally operate in Vegas, Austin, LA, Miami, Philly, Jersey, New York. And I have landing pages for all of those. And it's a blessing and a curse because I get a lot of leads now for like Vegas, but I get a lot of leads for planners looking for a local Vegas company because they don't want to pay the travel. So now I have like a different sales mindset where I have to like say, yes, we have a Vegas team, and I don't put in travel costs. I kind of just build them into the front end. And for some clients, they're like, no, that's too expensive. And for other clients, they're like, oh, that's great. Like we just booked the Pro Bowl for the NFL for their after party in Vegas. And they wanted our kaleidoscope photo booth, the Desintec Prisma, they call it. And I haven't used that thing since, I've used it twice since I bought it in like 2 years, but like $3,500, sure, I'll fly to Vegas with it. Like, it's probably cheaper than I normally travel for, but for a client like the NFL, like, fuck it, let's go. I don't have a ton going on right now, but like if I didn't maximize my SEO and start promoting myself as a local in Vegas, like that would have never come along.
As you're trying to do more of this custom photo activation, I guess, style events, I know you've mentioned some people in the industry earlier, like Bosco and OM. Who else do you look to, like, I guess, as this model for future Studio Z?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. Even companies like Limelight Photo Booth, and they've been around for years. Cleet is his name. I see his videos come up on Facebook Watch, his array stuff is like so freaking awesome. Between them, and if you've ever seen Splice Boys out of Australia, their array stuff is unreal, to the point where they were on a game show called the Cube in Australia, and the TV production hired them to create a 360 array around this set that they just used for a shot. Like it was like, like let's start the game, and they did a 360 camera array as their effect. And I'm like, that's the point where that's what you want to strive to be. They're not looking at it like, oh, hey, we're booking an event. No, they're hiring us as a production house to create something. And that's how OM visualizes. Like when they do their Steadicam video at any of these award shows or magazine parties or this and that, if you ever see them post on Instagram, they're not like, hey, we did this event. They're like, hey, we did this event and this is our film crew. They credit their DP, their director, their cinematographer, their set designer. They're in the film mindset. They're like a film crew who has an agency background. They're not like, oh, we're competing with Studio Z, or we're competing with like XYZ Photo Booths Montana. Like they're just like, they want to hire us to become a creative director for a fashion shoot. Like, yeah, let's do it. And yes, we can instant share them as well. And yeah, it's like those kind of things just are amazing to me. I love watching them. Bosco is kind of that way too. They're like an agency that does photo events, and say what you will about Bosco, and I say plenty of, their equipment fails, their output's not always the best, same with sharing boxes and that, but they're a powerhouse, and agencies spend thousands and thousands of dollars to bring them in for whatever reason, because they have that name recognition.
So at any point, do you drop photo booths from the Studio Z name?
Yeah, it's tough because when you've been doing it for 10 years, your SEO is so built on your name brand and your website, and to make a drastic change can crush you overnight organically, I feel.
Yeah.
I mean, most people refer to us as Studio Z, and I hate that too because I don't like to like make it sound like I am my own company, even though I am. I always say my team, even if my team is just me for most things. And then people are like, "Oh, Studio Z," and I'm like, "Yeah, hi, I'm Zach," and they're like, "Oh, that makes sense. You're the Z," and I'm like,
You're the
"But
Z in Studio
yeah,
Z. I don't want to keep you for too much longer, but I guess I've got two kind of final questions to
sure."
lead us out with. If you had $12,000 to start over and jump into the photo booth industry, what photo booth would you buy and why?
Ooh, I don't know if it matters. And it's like it's always one of those interesting things. Like I never wanted a mirror. I've never like the idea of dragging one of those like through New York City like makes me cringe. But I see people that like the first thing they buy is a Photomaster like Mirror X, and that thing's like 7 feet tall. And it's like you just spent a lot of money and you had to buy like a box truck to move it. If I had 12,000 and I was really trying to get into it fast, I would probably buy two or three lower end shells and put the electronics in. I mean, I'm very big on iPad to DSLR right now for its ease of use.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I picked up Photo Booth Supply Company Legacies. I bought them used anywhere from 1,200 to 3,000 with a printer. I got great deals on them. And then I ripped the Surface Pro out. I put an iPad in it. I was either running Phobo or Breeze now on them, and they're so easy for my staff to use. I can train them in like 30 minutes on how to use it. And you don't have to worry about like Windows networking and all that stuff. And I think that's the route I would go because you could scale faster versus like one really expensive product. But at the same time, it's got to be something you can know and master. Like it's like everyone getting into 360, but have never done video work before, and they don't understand frame rate versus shutter speed and what lighting you need. Like I keep seeing 360s with like one light or two lights on one side, nothing on the other. And I'm like, but now that's uneven. Slow motion needs a lot of light. How are you doing it with one light? Why is your video off center? I'm like, if you can master the basics of photography or videography, I don't think it matters what you buy. You can make it look good. And I mean, that was me without a kiosk back in the day. A kiosk is just a piece of metal, but it's the camera inside and the lighting. If you know how to use that, you can wrap it in it. You can wrap it in a cardboard box and it's still going to take a great photo. And that's what people see at the end of the day is your output, and your output is your marketing.
So Zach, with your TV background, you would still start off with the DSLR booth. You wouldn't jump into the 360, even with your
Not
video
now.
background.
I mean, there's too many. I mean, you thought iPad companies were like really saturating the market, and then this 360 craze is just. I mean, you see posts every day like, "Oh, someone tripped over my cable and broke the power." I was like, "Did you tape it down?" And they're like, "I didn't know you had to do that."
Oh my God!
It's just people jumping in, and I get the quick buck philosophy and like follow. It's like MLMs and pyramid schemes. It's like, oh, you see an easy way to get rich, but then you see all these people that are getting out of it already. Like, who thought creating a business during COVID was a smart idea? I don't know, but props to them. If they made it work, they made it work. And I like seeing people evolve. I like seeing people that are like $200 an hour and they're like laughing when we make comments about being 2,500. And then 6 months later, you see them post again being like, "No, you're worth, like, I charge $2,000 now." Like, you're like, oh, finally you've come around. Like, you wanted to enjoy your weekends versus working 7 events. I get it.
Better late than never. I think for a lot of people, it's a slow transition for when you realize that, hey, you can actually make a pretty decent living off of this, right? Either is a side hustle, which you still got your full-time job.
I work full-time, but my business makes more money.
Yeah. So,
and people are like, "Oh, you work full-time?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I work full-time, but my business is really my full-time job that I only work part-time in." And they're like, "What does that mean?" I'm like, I mean, this year we almost cleared $500,000 in sales. I want to do $1 million this year. That's my goal. I don't know if I'll hit it.
If you do, you've got to take me out to dinner, and then you got to send me on like an all paid trip.
There are plenty of people that make seven figures and don't
Absolutely.
openly talk about it, or
Yeah.
I assume they do. I mean, I talk to people I love, like Aldo in LA. Like, he did like an array for the Matrix premiere or after party. I think he told me it was like 35 grand for like 3 hours.
Wow.
And I still don't have the sales power to like command that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm waiting to hear back on a $23,000 quote for Super Bowl. We're supposed to find out today. We have that bid out. But like, I still like had a hard time charging that. But like, that was the number I needed to get to given the scope of work for the event. And knowing that they're 3 weeks away and don't have a vendor yet. And they need to credential, they need to figure out the logistics, all this and that very soon. They need to get someone signed. So I use that to my advantage. And if I get it, great. If I don't, I don't. But I'm never going to hit seven figures if I don't make these bids.
Yeah, 100%.
You know,
I think the first time, or I believe when I saw Steve Blessner post years ago, but he talked about how he cleared seven figures his first year right off the gate.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the whew? You know, but you know, I think his background made that transition a little bit easier for him.
There's also a difference too, and this has always been probably my biggest flaw, is I do work full time, so I don't have I have a home office. My gear's in my basement. That's where I work. I don't have full-time staff. Yeah. If I had full-time staff in sales and events and SEO and social marketing and all that stuff, I probably could clear 7 million not 7 million, seven figures this year easily. But your expenses, you know, you're paying 40 to 70,000 a year per head. What I might net the same amount. Yeah. So it's like, why go through all that stress if I'm going to come out with the same? I'm at this happy medium now where I'm like, all right, I made 450 gross this year. I'll net 200 of that maybe. After, you know, all my write-offs and this and that, which is also crazy to think about. Like, oh, I spent 200 plus grand on random shit this year. Like, okay, if you told me that 10 years ago, I would have laughed. At the end of the day, if I pocket and save 200, that's amazing. Where someone that grossed $1 million this year, but has 7 full-time staffers, maybe only netted 150 and, you know, had a lot more going. But then again, I'm in a different mindset because I have that full-time job as a backup. I have my health insurance through my union that I work with. You know, I have a pension with them. I always have that fallback. So I don't know. And people always say that, do you want to drop your TV gig and go full-time? I'm like, well, I'm already full-time, but I don't think I want to drop my TV gig. I don't know what this market will look like in 5 years. I don't know if this will still be a thing or what will evolve into next. I'm not ready to give up on that. And I need my health insurance. So, and I like working in TV, and I hate to say it, but I use my TV job to my advantage. You know,
as you should. I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
I do plenty of events for NBC. I do events for the talent of my show. If a TV show comes to me and they're owned by NBC or Universal, I'll use that to my advantage. Be like, by the way, I actually work for NBC in the Today Show. And they're like, oh, no way. We'd love to keep it in the family. Yeah. Great. You know, if that's how I have to sell, that's how I have to sell. I'll whore myself out. I don't care.
You got to use what you got, man. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. We're all dealt different cards. It's all how you play it.
Yeah, so, definitely.
All right, Zach, here is the $1 million question that the people want to know. You ready for it?
I'm ready.
All right. Zach Schiffman, why are you such an asshole? And I say that facetiously, but you know what? I'll let you speak to it.
No, I agree. I'm an asshole in online forums and things because people didn't really help me when I started. I took the time to care about my craft and focus on it and learn and build it for my own. It goes back to me talking about that 360. You know, I spent 10 grand to import something from the UK. I figured out the workflow. I built my own array. Like, Steve helped me with that too, but I didn't have these turnkey solutions. And then there are people every day that post in these groups. I can't figure out, where does this USB from the spinner go? It goes in the fucking USB port on your laptop. Like, and they're like, I wish there was a manual. There's literally a manual. Like, go to the website. In the box, there was a manual. These people, like, if you can't help yourself and just take the time, it's a business, it's not a hobby. If you can't take the time to just Take 5 minutes to try to figure it out on your own before you just ask strangers to do your business for you, your competitors to do it for you. And I love that there's this sense of community that everyone loves to help each other. But at the end of the day, everyone's a competitor, and we're helping new competitors on the daily create the same product. And I will help anyone if they help themselves first. Come to me and say like, hey, I've tried this, like, here's my output, I just can't figure out like what I'm doing wrong here, versus saying, hey, where'd you get those lights, can you send me a link? Or you'd be like, Amazon. Oh yeah, but can you send, like, what did you search for, what link? I'm like, just search LED light. Like, why do I have to be your mom? Like, it infuriates me in a way. But then there are like newbies that come and want to learn and understand value, and they're like, we want to make this great. Here's what I'm doing, what can I do better? And I will help that person 9 times out of 10, you know.
I've seen that. Like, I know who you're gonna give spice to, and I know that, you know, I can easily tell from the post that, all right, you know, Zach's gonna give good knowledge, because you can see that this person is actually trying. He's not just showing up and saying, hey, here's my spoon, feed me.
Right. I mean, the market is getting easier and easier by the week. You know, iPad booths was the first thing with that. Like, okay, now you can just buy a piece of metal and put your iPad in it, and like everything's cloud-based, and great, you have a business, and you don't have to know anything. Like, you don't have to know what shutter speed and aperture mean. Sure, just leave it on auto, it's good to go. You have to put your blood, sweat, and tears into it at some point. Like, or you're not a serious business. That's why I'm an asshole, I guess.
Hey man, good answer. If it counts for anything, I absolutely don't think that you're an asshole at all. I think you're amazing at what you do. I love seeing your trajectory. No, you're not an asshole. I like to say I'm passionate. You're passionate, but you're also straightforward. And I think a lot of people who, when you're straightforward, that's the perception. When you don't, you know, everything, you don't handle everything with kid gloves. You're an adult. So, you know, you speak to people like you're an adult. You're not talking to 5-year-olds. It's like, hey, listen, this is the industry that you're in. There are things that you're going to have to go through. There are things you're going to have to learn. You're going to have to troubleshoot at events. You're going to need to understand these things.
And I always say, spend money to make money.
Yeah.
I use this analogy where for the longest time, I wanted a Canada Goose winter coat. And I work outside for my TV job. And I think one year, but I never wanted to spend $800, $900 on a coat. I thought that was ridiculous. Yeah. So, you know, first I bought a North Face coat for $200. I was cold. Didn't really help much. And then I bought this other company that was like a knockoff Canada Goose that used not real down. And that was like a $350 coat. I was still cold. Didn't like the coat. I finally ponied up and spent the money and bought a Canada Goose coat. And if I had just bought the right equipment, the expensive equipment, the quality equipment, the first go around, I would have saved more in the long run. Yeah, now I've essentially spent the amount of 2 of those Canada Goose coats on coats I don't wear anymore. And it's the same thing. Like, there are 360 manufacturers who make a solid product, and there are 360 manufacturers who you see tons of complaints about because their arm broke on their first event. There's no customer service. There's this or that. Do your research. Don't be cheap. Spend the money to make money, and you'll make more faster because you won't be playing catch up when your stuff breaks or isn't good enough.
Hey, Zach, I think that's a perfect way to end it right there. I really appreciate your time, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to show up. Zach, Studio Z Photo Booths, Pick Social, Shea Masori. Take care.